Okay, welcome. We are now into Parshas Toldos over here. We're in the 6th Torah portion in the book of Genesis. We're on page 153. Good copy. Great. Page 153 of this edition we're using over here. Okay, so we're going to see further progression in this great history of the world and this great drama about the journey of man, the journey of men and choices. And we see that men have had choices from the beginning of time. Men have had choices that Adam was created in God Almighty's image. The first man, his wife was created in God Almighty's image, like we are all. We're all created, we're all from one human being. And so we're all spiritually created by God Almighty. We're all physically created by God Almighty. And what makes a difference in our lives is our choices. So we're going to see that this great mission that Abraham, our father, took on is something that he made a choice to do. So Abraham made this choice, and this is a choice that he tried to inculcate into both of his children. He had two children. He had Ishmael first, and he had Isaac. And then Isaac followed in his father's path, and Ishmael originally didn't. Later on, he did tshuva. He returned to God Almighty. But you could say that maybe it was Ishmael's upbringing, maybe he had a different mother, maybe because he was born earlier than Isaac, maybe all these different factors affected his choices. And what we're going to see is in this week's Torah portion, we see that Isaac becomes married, and he has two sons. One son, the firstborn son is Esau, and the secondborn son is Jacob. And even though Esau and Jacob come from exactly the same, everything's the same about them. They have the same father, they have the same mother, they're born at the identical same time. I mean, they're twins born within a few seconds of each other. They have all the same gifts, all the same opportunity. They grew up in the exact same household. They have Abraham, our father, as their grandfather. They have Isaac and Rivka as their mother and father. So they have everything exactly the same. Yet we see that Esau decides, he affirmatively decides to opt out of his mission. He affirmatively decides that he is going to take a different path than his father. So we see the power of choice that we have as human beings. We have the choice at every moment to now, in the next thought, the next speech, and the next action, to act according to God Almighty's will and his spirit and what he wants for us and what his vision for us is, or God forbid the opposite. So we could see people like to claim that a person's behavior is based on their upbringing, who their parents are, they had better opportunities, worse opportunities, and so forth. And at the end of the day, it's not because of anything external. It all comes down to our personal choice. Here we're going to see two individuals born into exactly the same household with exactly the same opportunities, and yet one of them chose to go in the direction of following his impulses and maximizing the experiences of the physical world. And the other one, that was Esau, and the other one, Jacob, said, no, he's not going to maximize the experiences in the physical world. He's going to maximize his spiritual growth. And he spent his time learning Torah, and he spent his time doing righteous deeds and raising a family. And we're going to see how that then he becomes the forefather, follows in his father's footstep and his grandfather's footstep, and he becomes the forefather of the Jewish people, so that the Jewish people are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the lineage by choice. The choice of each one of the other ones, that Ishmael and Esau could have made a choice to follow directly in the footsteps of their fathers, but they chose not to. And however, that choice is not permanent, because we see that we're going to learn that Esau, just like Ishmael, returned to the proper path later in his life. So also Esau's descendants today can return to the proper path and fulfill their purpose and their very important, essential, and beautiful purpose in the creation of the world that God Almighty has in mind for them, and the intention for them can be accomplished. So that is a choice, and we're all waiting eagerly for every single human being to make the right choice. So we're on page 155, and Parshas Toldos, chapter 25 of Genesis, verse 19. And the Torah relates, this is now going to be the generations. We're going to talk about the descendants of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. And Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rivkah. And we studied at the end of last week's Torah portion, we learned about the process of Abraham sending his disciple, Eliezer, to go and find a wife for Isaac from one of Isaac's from the family members that were in the outside of where Abraham was living and outside the land of Israel. And he went and he successfully brought back Rivkah as a wife for Isaac. And so we see that Rivkah originally could not have children, and we see the power of prayer in verse 21 that Isaac prayed with great intensity, as did Rivkah, but particularly mentions here Isaac's prayers, that he was praying for her well-being, and then she conceived. And we see the importance of prayer, the power of prayer. Prayer is something that has the potential and the ability to actually change the course of history, to change the course of nature. We have the ability to pray to God Almighty to move things in ways that are not the way they were going to be, but for our prayer, because our choices make a difference in the world. And she notices that there's these twins in her, and they're each one struggling to get out at different times. Jacob, well, she didn't know it was Jacob at the time, but one of them is kicking, seems to be eager to get out when she passes the yeshiva of Shem ve'Aver. Remember, Shem was the son of Noach, and he started the yeshiva to teach Torah. And he and his grandson Aver had a yeshiva, and when she would go by there, one son was very enthusiastic, and when she went by houses of idolatry, another son was kicking inside, and she was, what's going on over here? So she went to ask the prophet of the generation, to ask Shem, who was the head of the yeshiva, and he explained to her, there's these two nations inside of you, in your womb, and they're going to diverge. They're going to be diverging, and one's going to be predisposed towards righteousness, and the other one towards wickedness, the elder towards wickedness. Now, this is not saying, this predisposition is not predetermination. What this means to say, he's prophesizing as to what kind of choices this person is going to make. But the person, each one of us still has the chance to make the right choices. Doesn't matter what choices we made until now. That's irrelevant. I mean, it's irrelevant in terms of what amends we have to make between us and God and between us and other human beings. But it has no impact on the choice that we're going to make in the next moment. So, and Shem describes this, there's going to be this intertwined relationship between these two sons for all generations. That there's going to, when one becomes powerful, the other one's going to be weakened. When that one becomes weakened, the other one's going to become powerful. And then they were born. The first one was Esau. He was, red complexion and full of hair, and they called him Esau completed. And then his brother was born, holding onto the heel of the elder one. And his name was Yaakov. Yaakov means heel, that he's grasping on to Esau's, holding onto his heel. He's not letting go. We're going to see there's this tremendous competition between the two of them for whose vision of the world is going to have the upper hand. And so they started to grow up. We see in verse 27. And Esau was very, very capable of kind of trying to mislead his father by asking all kinds of sophisticated questions and making himself look very religious, very pious, to try to, disguise his kind of more twisted thinking. What it says over here, Jacob was a simple man, did not have any plans. All he did is he went and learned Torah in the Torah yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever. And that's what we call a yeshiva that we have on Saturday afternoon, Shabbos afternoon. During the summertime, we call it yeshiva Shem Ve'ever, and also during the winter we have it on after Shabbos, on Motzei Shabbos. And now comes this incredible clash where Esau, as the firstborn, has all this merit. The lineage passes through the firstborn. The rights of the priesthood pass through the firstborn. We learn that Abraham, the priesthood of the world, had passed from Shem to Abraham, our father, and we studied that before, or learned that before, and now it's going to Yitzchak, and it would naturally go to the firstborn son, would be Esau. But Esau was not interested in the complexities of the service of God Almighty, and also he was daunted by the tremendous responsibility of being the leader, the priest, the one who's going to be responsible for the spiritual well-being of everybody else. That was extremely daunting to him, because when you have responsibility for other people, you're held to a much higher standard, and it's an exacting standard. So he came back from hunting. He was, actually being murderous that day. He was involved in inappropriate activities. And he says to his brother Jacob, he wants to have some of this food that had been prepared for the morning in the household of the family, because Abraham, our father, had passed away that day. And Jacob says to him, he sees that his whole behavior is degenerate. And he says he will give him this lentils mix, but only if Esau will sell him his birthright. And so Esau was already not interested in it. He understood that in the future that there was going to pass from the right of the priesthood was going to pass from the firstborn to the tribe of Levi, which was going to be one of the sons of Jacob. And there's so many responsibilities to be a priest. Person has to, can't get he can't get drunk in the service, and he can't have his hair grow too long, and all these things are like capital punishment from these type of transgressions. So he didn't want to get involved in that. So he says, okay, so he was like, what use is this birthright? What is use of this firstborn birthright to him? And Jacob says, okay, make an oath. And Esau made the oath, and then he gave him the food. And it says, verse 34, that Esau spurned the birthright. V'yivez Esau esa b'chera. He spurned the birthright. He was willing to give it up. Okay, so we have this tremendous tension between these two brothers. Jacob, who is the secondborn, sees that the world leadership needs to be in proper hands. The world leadership is in the hands of a person who's a murderer and being immoral and who's making the wrong choices. And he says, on the benefit of the world, he needs to take the opportunity to transfer this leadership from the firstborn to the younger born, to Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, because he's taking responsibility for the world. He's like, imagine being, what this is like? This is being like at the helm of the ship. You're at the helm of the ship, and you've got your captain and you have your first mate. And the captain is the captain of the ship. You can't countermand the captain, but you see the captain is drunk and he's staggering around, and you have to say to the captain, you've got to pass the responsibility to me. I'm only the first mate, but the ship is, we're not going to survive we're all on this ship, this planet, this universe that God Almighty created for us, for human beings, as the pinnacle of his creation. And we've got to steward our choices correctly to be making moral choices and choices in keeping with God Almighty's will. And so we can't have a drunkard who's deciding that he wants to be immoral and he wants to take things that don't belong to him and he wants to kill people and he wants to be in improper relationships. And he's like that, he's going to destroy the whole ship. So the first mate is saying, okay, listen, you step aside, sell me the captain of the ship. I'm going to take responsibility for the ship. That's what is happening over here. So now this is one level of the transfer of that leadership role from Esau to Jacob. And we're going to return to this struggle in a few verses. But meanwhile, we're going to go to chapter 26. And there's another famine in the land, and Isaac was not allowed to leave the Holy Land because he was brought up as Abraham, our father, was bringing up on the Mount Moriah to be a sacrifice. And so he had the status of a holy offering. And so he was not allowed to leave the land of Israel. God appears to him in verse 2, do not go down to Egypt, which his father had gone down to Egypt. And Jacob, his son, goes to Egypt later on, but he's not allowed to go to Egypt. So stay in this land, for I will give these lands, this is the Holy Land, I will give these lands to you and your descendants. I will fulfill the oath that I made to your father Abraham. This is verse 3. For I will make your descendants so numerous as the stars of the sky, and give all these lands to your descendants, and all the nations of the earth will bless themselves by mentioning the names of your descendants. So on one hand, you have a special blessing for the Jewish people, meaning to say the descendants of Abraham and Isaac. To this point, we're up to Isaac. But that special role in the world brings blessing to everybody else. We've seen this already before, that the job of the leadership role is to make sure the whole world is connected to God Almighty. Everyone's blessed by this special mission that we're all on, and by the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob fulfilling their purpose. So if you're not Jewish, your responsibility is, when you see a Jewish person, you've got to go to him and say, you got to step up to the plate. Why are you not doing your job? Now, at this point, the job is to reawaken all the Jewish people and all the non-Jews, but you need to awaken the Jewish people to keep their responsibilities. And so as a non-Jew, you have the ability to really come to a Jewish person and with great strength and great clarity, lovingly wake him up to the fact, why are you driving on Shabbos? Why are you eating non-kosher food? You know, if a rabbi comes up to them and speaks to them like that, they're going to be, they might walk the other way. But if a non-Jew comes up to them and says, excuse me, Mr. Jew, Miss Jew, why are you not living like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? You're going to have such an incredible impact on them, because they can't brush you off. You're not Jewish. You're awakening the fact they want to assimilate. Some of them want to assimilate and be like non-Jews. And here's a non-Jew walking up to them and saying, hey, I need you. The non-Jew is saying to the Jew, I need you, Jew, to be more Jewish. The world needs you to be more Jewish. What does it mean, Jewish? Jewish means to be committed to life with God Almighty, to bring the revelation of godliness into the world and help every human being have that connection. So every human being needs every single one of the 14 million or whatever number of Jewish people there are, they should increase, to be activated and as a acting and living like a Jew. So that's for the benefit of every other human being. That brings blessing. So in verse 6, we see over here that Isaac settled in Gerar, and we have a similar situation to what happened when Abraham went down to Egypt and he told people that Sarah, his wife, was a sister, in order to protect them from that he shouldn't be killed, because people were immoral. They didn't say, oh, that's someone's wife, he's not going to go near her. Oh, that's someone's wife. If she was attractive, they would kill the husband and take her. So that they were saying, oh no, this is a sister. So at least the husband would survive. Now, in this case, as we see over here, that they were a little bit more refined. The king was more refined than it was in the times of it was in Egypt. And the king of Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, he did not just go take her, but he came to understand, as you can see in the verses, that he saw that Isaac and Rivka and Rebekah were conducting themselves as husband and wife. And he was like, whoa, now I see your husband and wife. Why'd you tell me that she was a sister? And Avimelech was very disturbed. The king was Philistines was very disturbed. That's going to bring a sin. As the king, he could have gone and tried to court her, and that would have been a very great disaster for the king and for the people. Now we see already how the Sheva Mitzvah Ben Enoch, these rules of morality, are already ingrained in humanity, meaning to say, even though people were violating them and so forth, but Avimelech knew that it's not right to take someone else's wife. So he's admitting that he's acknowledging that he might have taken this woman, but he's now shocked to discover that she belongs to Isaac. So he's like, oh, he would have been caught in a terrible transgression. He recognizes that. He understands that as a human being, you don't take someone else's wife. And he commands the people that it'll be don't lay a finger on this man or his wife, or they'll be surely put to death. And then in verse 12, we see Isaac sowed grains and he prospered, and he continued to prosper until he became extremely wealthy. And he owned flocks and herds and many business enterprises. And the people around him started to envy him. The Philistines started to envy him. They started to block up the wells that were the source, the water that he was using for his flocks and so forth. And so they blocked them up out of jealousy. So I wanted to mention over here that before we get to the blocking up, so that he was in verse 12, that this is about the importance of giving charity, tzedakah, that he reaped 100-fold more than he expected. And then when he calculated the actual yield that he had for the purpose of taking tithes, for giving 10% to God, then he found that it was even 100-fold more than what he had actually thought he had harvested. So because this is the merit, when a person intends to give tithing, when he plans to give his income percentage, 10 or 20% of his income to God Almighty, by supporting those that are serving God Almighty, supporting people that are in need of assistance and so forth, increasing the learning of Torah, then that brings tremendous blessing to the person who's giving. And here we see he was intending to give it. Because he made that commitment, then he received the blessing, and he received many, many times over. So going back to verse 16, Abimelech says to Isaac, "Go away from us. You've become much more powerful than him." He was even almost, he was more prosperous than the king. And so Isaac went and he camped further away, and then he redug other wells, and there's this struggle. But he keeps finding fresh spring water. Then the shepherds the neighboring shepherds start to quarrel with his shepherds and blocking up saying this belongs to them. And it keeps going back and forth until he finally, in verse 22, he keeps moving on, and he opens wells, and he calls this place Rehovot, because no one quarreled with him. For now God has granted us ample space to expand, and we will flourish materially in the land. And then he goes up to Beersheba. And again, God Almighty blesses him. I'm the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid because of all this struggle in the world. For I'm with you. I will bless you and make your descendants numerous on account of my servant Abraham. So we see that Isaac's service, we see this fascinating. We learned Abraham was busy with going out and inviting guests in, and he's busy transforming the whole world. And Isaac, what do we read about Isaac's service of God? We see that he brought children into the world. He got married, he built a family, he brought children into the world, and he's digging these wells. And this digging the wells really represents, if you study the inner teachings of the Torah, the Kabbalah, that what it's referring to is digging deeper inside of ourselves. That Abraham was coming from a role as an influencer. He's coming to people and saying, you need to know about God Almighty. You need to thank God Almighty. You need to like he's an external influence. He's inspiring people. People get very inspired. But what happens when someone inspires you, but it didn't take hold inside of you? That inspiration goes away. And within a few hours, few days, few weeks, months, years, you kind of cool off and the person can be back to themselves. So Isaac's service is about showing him men and women how they have to dig deeper inside of themselves. They have to dig the wells inside of themselves to find the source of the divinity inside of themselves. You can't live life based on the inspiration of somebody else, because then you always it's kind of like drinking coffee. Person is going to stay awake, live life. He's going to stay awake by drinking coffee. Okay. If you don't drink coffee, you're going to fall asleep. So you've kind of hooked yourself on this external stimuli to keep you going. So you always need the rabbi to say something really interesting or something new or some sort of interaction to keep you going. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that knowledge of God Almighty has got to come from within you, because you have the divine soul. So you need the inspiration from outside, but you need to use that inspiration from outside to then start digging inside and find it inside of yourself. So you are now being carried by the divinity inside of yourself. And that's going to power you no matter what the circumstances are. No matter how much strife there is going on around, like we see by Isaac, they're fighting against him. No, this is my well, this is my well. Everyone's fighting with him. No, okay. God says, don't worry about this. You are going to prosper, and descendants are going to prosper. You have to look at the long-term picture. He had 2 children, yet there's millions and millions, tens and hundreds of millions of descendants that he has, because the Jewish people are from Jacob. But then there's the Esau has tens and perhaps hundreds of millions of descendants. So we need to establish this point. We have to take the quiet time. We have to learn to find that inner quiet inside ourselves and know that it's with us all the time wherever we go. We don't need another video. We don't need another inspiration. I mean, you're always welcome to come to the classes, and we all need to learn. But you have to know that it's what's really touching you when you listen to the words of Torah is the truth inside of you that's already there. That's why it's resonating with you, because it's already inside of you. So therefore, you hear some words of Torah, words of truth, and the truth resonates with the truth that's already inside of you. So you've got to start seeing how it's inside of you already. And spend the time. We see Isaac's time is building inwards. It's the inward building. And you need all these. You need these 2 aspects. You do need to go out to the world and help people. You got to save people from their own poor choices and help show them a better way. But you also have to be building inside yourself at the same time. You have to be in quiet prayer and your own quiet study and your own quiet learning. That has to be done. It's not negotiable. Because it's from that inner strength that you develop that you have the ability to then go out and influence other people. When you spend time in quiet reflection and in prayer and in Torah learning, and that type of that you can call it hisbeinus, there's different aspects of this type of quiet time, and tefillah, which is prayer. Then when you're really grounding yourself, when you're really grounded, you have the power to affect people outside of you on a much, much greater level. They'll just be drawn. We see Abraham was running out to get people, but Isaac was inward and people were drawn to him. They just came to him. So, so then we see now in verse, we're still in chapter 26, and we see in verse, then Avimelech comes back, and Isaac's, suspicious of them. What's their intention? Why have you come to see me? That since you see that Avimelech hates him and sent him away. So they said, we've seen your father and seen that you too, God has blessed you with unnatural success. So they want to make a covenant with him. A solemn oath. They want to make sure that Isaac's not going to do anything negative to them, and they're basically requesting of him that he should treat them in a peaceful way. So they agreed to their proposal. Isaac agreed, and they made a feast, and they ate, and they made this covenant, and they found more water. There was this success was happening after they left, and they called this place redesignated as Beersheba, the well of the oath. Okay, then in verse 34, Esau gets married, and these wives were in keeping with Esau's poor choices. These wives were rebellious, spiritually rebellious towards Isaac and Yitzhak and Rivka. And now, 23 years after he got married, so now Isaac had grown old. Now we're chapter 27, verse 1. And his eyesight had dimmed, and he realized he wants to bless his sons. But who's he going to bless? He wants to bless Esau, because Esau is the firstborn, and Esau is the one who has this tremendous power, because on one hand, you have this dichotomy. Esau, even though he's using his powers out incorrectly, he's making poor choices, he's an extremely powerful individual. He's a hunter, he's a warrior in the physical sense. He's out in the world, he's conquering people and things, and he has this incredible power. Jacob, on the other hand, is a Tomim. He's sitting, he's learning Torah, doesn't have any complicated ways about himself, and he is he's connected to the kav of emes, the direction of truth, but he's not he's a spiritually powerful person, but he's not physically, doesn't have this power of Esau. So actually we learn in the Kabbalah, we learn that Esau actually comes from the world of Tehu, which is a world that preceded the world of Tikkun, the world that we're in, and Jacob is from Tikkun. Esau actually comes from a higher source. It's like a wild divine revelations. It's beyond the ability of anything to contain these revelations in the world of Tehu. And Jacob is from the world of Tikkun, orderly, getting the job done, focused. So what you really need is both of them. But who's going to be in charge? If you have the super powerful guy who's just running off in all directions, you're not going to get very far. Even when he's making the right choices, meaning to say he's not going against God, even when he's making the right choices, he's going to be all over the place. But Yaakov, however, doesn't have the same level of power, but he has the discipline of focus. And that's why we're going to see right now this dramatic experience between Isaac and Rivka, the mother and the father. They themselves have completely different viewpoints of what's supposed to happen. So what do you think is going to happen? Isaac says, who's the real leader over here? Look at Esau. He's super powerful. This guy could, if he gets on the right track, if I give him a blessing and I put him on the right track, we're going to have a redemption for the entire world. We take this power and we turn it in the right direction. The world is going to be like a positive nuclear energy. So he wants to give the blessing to Esau. But Rivka, his wife, is like, one second here. There's a bigger picture over here. Esau himself is unrestrained. He's going all over the place. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, it's chaotic. The blessings have to go to Jacob because the one who has to steer the ship has to be Jacob. Yes, the engines, the powerful engines of the ship. It's like you have a ship, big nuclear-powered submarine or nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The nuclear power, where's the power? It's in the engine room. But you need to have the right captain of the ship who's thinking carefully and he's making the proper decisions and he's pacing and the ship and going in the right direction and so forth. So she's like, we got to put Jacob. You're going to compare the power of this captain of the ship to the nuclear energy in the engine room. It's like there's no comparison whatsoever. This guy maybe could, lift up, I don't know, to how much can a person do? 200 pounds, 150 pounds? He could bench 200 pounds maybe on a good day. And meanwhile, this engine room could power hundreds of thousands of tons of bench press, hundreds of thousands of tons through the water, right? So you need to have both, but she saw you have to have the right captain in charge of the mission. So that's why we're going to see that she countermands her husband, and we're going to watch this incredible drama, which is really the drama of the world. This drama of Jacob and Esau is going on right now. And so Isaac says to Esau, go prepare food. I want to give you a blessing. And he goes off to do that. And meanwhile, Rebecca, his wife, pulls aside Jacob, the younger son, and she says to him, quick, go get his father wants food, go get 2 kid goats, and I'll bake them up for you. It's Passover, so we're going to make them for the Passover offering. And your father will like it, and he's going to bless you. So Jacob was getting nervous from this proposal. Why? Because first of all, he has a different voice. But second of all, Esau is this big, hairy, bulky guy, with a lot of hair. His body is completely covered in hair. And Jacob is smooth-skinned. So what happens if his father touches him and he doesn't, he realizes it's not Esau, he's going to curse him. So his mother says, let your curse be upon me, my son, just heed my words and go and bring them to me. So he went and his mother prepared the food and she took Esau. She was safeguarding Esau's clothes. Esau was a very powerful fighter, and he had killed Nimrod. If you recall, Nimrod was the big king who was basically the king of the world, and Abraham, our father, had gone up against him, and Nimrod was killed by Esau, and God captured these special clothes that Nimrod had. They were like furs, and so Esau safeguarded them with his mother. His mother dressed Jacob in them, so that he should it should be clear that it should appear like it's him, like Esau. And she placed the skins of the kid goats that had just been slaughtered on the arms and the smooth part of his neck, so that if the father reached out and touched, he would feel a lot of hairiness. And so we look in verse 18. There's so much to see over here, but he goes in and he says, he's speaking very carefully because he's presenting himself as Esau, but at the same time, he doesn't want to lie. So if you look at the words very carefully, he's saying to his father, Esau, your firstborn, meaning to say what he's really saying, it is Esau is your firstborn, but he's saying in a way that his father could understand it to mean that Esau is standing there, but he's trying not to say it in a way that it's going to be an outright lie. I've done as you told me. And so he says, how'd you do it so quickly? Because his mother did it right there from goats that were right there by the house. And Jacob says, because God, your God, arranged it to happen this way for me. So Isaac was getting suspicious because Esau never mentioned God. So he's like, let's check you out here. Come close. I want to touch you. Are you really my son Esau? He's getting suspicious. And so you can imagine this is like incredible suspenseful moment. What's going to happen over here? So Jacob comes to his father, Isaac, touches him and says, the voice is the voice of Jacob's, but the hands are the hands of Esau. So he didn't recognize him because the hands were hairy. like the arms of Esau. And he started to bless him. So you really are my son, Esau. And Jacob replies, I. It is I, but it could be understood by his father as I am Esau. Isaac said, serve me so I can partake of my son's food, so he can grant you my soul's blessings. And then he brought him wine, and he ate, and he wine and drank. Please come close and kiss me, my son. Verse 27, he kissed him, and he sends him the he starts to bless him. Now, interesting thing I just saw today in a comment, the Beis Halevi, he writes on this week's parsha. What does it mean that the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the arms of the hands, but the arms are like Esau? So we normally read this to mean that he's got these two conflicting pieces of information. It sounds like Jacob, and on the other hand, it feels like Esau. So the Beis Halevi explains, this great Torah sage from the late 1800s. He says, what really happened is Esau wanted to make sure that Jacob was not going to steal the blessing. So he came out with a trick. He said to his father, listen, we're going to come up with a, we're going to come up. So what did he think? He thinks like this. Look at this. He figures out a trick. If Jacob is going to appear in front of his father to try to steal the blessing, doesn't it make sense that Jacob is going to, the father's pretty much blind, so it doesn't have to worry about the appearances, but the voice is the obvious giveaway. So doesn't it make sense that Jacob was going to try to disguise his voice and sound like Esau? Obviously, he's going to show up and he's going to make his voice, whatever it would be, let's say gruff, and hi, welcome, have a seat. Well, he's going to make his voice very gruff, and he's going to sound like Esau. So therefore, Esau says to his father, I'm going to give you a secret sign to know that it's really me. If the voice sounds like Jacob, then that's really me. It's really Esau. Why? Because he figures like this. Jacob, if he comes to steal the blessing, is going to try to fake himself to be like Esau. He's not going to speak like Jacob. So Esau says he'll fake to pretend, make his voice sound like Jacob, and then his father will know that it's really Esau, because Jacob would never use his normal voice. So what happens? Jacob comes in, he doesn't fake his voice. He speaks like Jacob. So Isaac says, he meets all the qualifications. His voice is the voice of Jacob, which is the way that Esau just told me that when Esau's going to speak like Jacob, if he sounds like Jacob, that's a sign it's Jacob, because Jacob was Jacob. Jacob would be faking like Esau. So since the voice is the voice of Jacob and the arms of Esau, that's proof that it's really Esau. So it's incredible. This Beis Halevi is telling us an incredible point over here. How did, because Esau was the one who had the crooked thinking. He was the one who was coming up with the tricks. He's the one who set up the trap for himself. If he didn't try any tricks, he was the one who's trying to, change his voice. But in changing his voice, he actually set it up, saying he was going to change his voice. He set it up that actually Jacob was able to get the blessing. So I think this is a fascinating point about here. Despite all the plans of those people who want to go fight against God and fight against the Torah and fight against the Jewish people, in their own plans themselves comes their own defeat. Esau's complicated machinations is what caused him to lose over here, because he came up with this complicated scheme that he was going to disguise his voice as Jacob's to prove that he was really Esau. And now it all unwound, and his father gives Jacob the blessing. An incredible, beautiful insight that Beis Halevi has. So verse 28 starts flowing the incredible blessings. May God grant you the blessings. And here we see that there's 10 blessings: the dew of the heavens, the fat, meaning the choicest fruits of the land, an abundance of grain, wine. May people serve you. That's 5. 6 nations bow down to you. 7 is may you be master over your brothers. 8, may your mother's sons prostrate themselves before you. 9, those who curse you will be cursed. And 10, those who bless you will be blessed. So the blessing is given to Jacob. He got the blessing that his father thinks he's giving it to the firstborn Esau, and Jacob gets the blessing. Whoa. Now what happens is Jacob, he finishes giving Jacob the blessing. Jacob is just leaving, just goes out, and who shows up? Esau. He's now come back from the field. He's prepared this big dinner for his father. And now he wants to get the blessing. So he says, you can't but be trembling inside from this moment, because you see that the father wants to give Esau the blessing. Esau wants the blessing. After all said and done, he did sell the firstborn right before, but he really wants the blessing. And meanwhile, Jacob got the blessing, which is what's supposed to have happened, but it's still it's unbelievable. There's incredibly the emotions here are just overwhelming of what's happening. So he says, "Let my father arise and partake of his son's food, so that the game that he brought him, the wild food, so that he may give me your soul's blessing." So his father says to him, "Who are you?" Right? Esau was just here getting the blessing. So who are you now? If the other guy that I just gave the blessing to was Esau, and you're now here with more food to get the blessing, who are you? Son says, "I am your firstborn son, Esau." So then we're talking about what we must be feeling inside, the electricity inside here. This is exactly what Isaac was feeling. He was shuddering in bewilderment. Do you realize the consequences over here of what just happened? He sees like the greatest spiritual depths in a negative sense opening up in front of him, meaning to say, he just blessed the wrong son, because we know that he's supposed to give the blessing to the firstborn. He can't give the blessing for the firstborn to the secondborn, and he just gave this blessing for the firstborn to the secondborn. So this is a massive, shocking event. So then he says, "Who was it that just brought me food? And that I ate it and I blessed him before you got here." So then he says, so he realized it was Yaakov, but he realized it was supposed to be that way because the food was exactly the way it was supposed to be, and the spiritually speaking. So it says, so indeed he indeed will be blessed. So Jacob will be blessed. So when Esau heard, verse 34, when Esau heard his father's words, he let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." Can you imagine the incredible distress? So his father says, "Your brother came with guile and took your blessing." He came with, in a way of the mirma, but that trickery was really, that Esau set it up by this whole thing with the voice. So Esau says, "Is that why he's named Jacob?" Meaning it's the akiv means to ensnare. He's ensnared him twice. So Isaac didn't know what the first time. So he says, "What happened?" So he says, "He took away my birthright, and that when the time he sold it for the food, and now he's taken my blessing." So then Isaac realized that he didn't do anything wrong, because since Esau had sold, now he found out for the first time that Esau had sold the first bread of the firstborn. So he realized that really now the blessing does belong to Jacob. So Isaac still presses. He says, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac said to Esau, he answered him, "What good is it going to do now? I've made him master over you." No, Isaac says to Esau, "What good will it be for me to bless you now? I've made him, Jacob, a master over you, and have given him all his brothers as servants. So whatever belongs to you, even your children, will now automatically be his. And I have sustained him with grain and wine. So what then is there left for me that I could do for you, my son?" And Esau said to his father, "Do you not have at least you only have one blessing? Bless me also." And Esau was crying. So then Jacob, verse 39, he blesses him. So it's interesting. He said that he made a stipulation with Jacob that the blessings would take effect if Jacob deserved them, because Jacob was able to, if he didn't deserve them, he'd be able to still accept God's justice. But since Isaac recognized that Esau would rebel against God if he didn't get what he thought he deserved, therefore he gives him a blessing that whether he deserves it or not, he's going to bless that your dwelling will be blessed with the fat of the land and the dew of the heavens above. Even though your land will belong to your brother and you will serve him, you will live in comfort. The future homeland of your mightiest descendants will be the fertile Italian peninsula. Verse 40, you will live by the sword, by your sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you see that Jacob and his descendants are sinning, and that you're rightfully grieved that they were the primary recipients of the blessing, you'll be permitted to throw his yoke off your neck and be temporarily freed of his lordship, even though you will remain his servant in essence. So now this is a blessing, but this is going to be this permanent tension between Jacob, who took the stewardship of the world from Esau, as we described before, because that's what the world needed at the same time. Esau is now kind of stuck. It's kind of like the nuclear engine is tired of this captain telling him what to do, right? The nuclear engine in the aircraft carrier is tired, and the nuclear engine is Esau, all the power. And the captain is this, high connected person connected to the divine will and guiding the whole ship. So the nuclear engine, which is billions of times more powerful than the captain, is like, what do I need the captain for? I want to run the ship myself. So he's always fighting to there's always that power struggle. And if the captain is doing his job, then the nuclear engine is going to be okay. The captain is off track, then the nuclear engine is going to start getting out of hand. So this is the battle from all the generations. Now you can understand the Jewish people and the descendants of Esau have this struggle of the Esau has this raw power, and Jacob has this divine connection and is taken on the mission to change the world and to transform the world into a place of godliness. He can't do it. Jacob can't do it without Esau. The Jewish people cannot do this transformation of the world without the non-Jews, who are the vast majority of the world. The non-Jews have to transform into being God-fearing people who want to serve God also. So the Jewish people are like the captain without the nuclear. If the nuclear engine is not working on the ship, where it's dissipating nuclear energy all over the place, it's just chaos and disaster and nuclear explosions, we're not going anywhere. On the other hand, Esau can't do it without Jacob. Because the nuclear, what's good is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier if you don't have a captain? It can be all revved up and all powerful, and nothing's happening. Not in gear. So this is the world. The world we live in is these two powerful forces of Jacob and Esau, and both of them are needed. Both of them are essential. It's not about, no, the captain doesn't walk around thinking, oh, I'm the special one over here. I don't really need the nuclear engine. That's an absurd thought. He needs the nuclear engine because that's the engine of the ship. That's the power of the host of the world is the non-Jewish nations, the descendants of Esau. And the captain has to respect and spiritually nurture and guide this power of the nations, and the nations both collectively and as individual nations and individual people in each nation, descendants of Esau. And it would be absurd for the nuclear engine of this aircraft carrier to say, I don't need this captain. Let's throw him off. Let's knock him off the ship. He's just here to think he's in charge. We don't need him. No, the nuclear engine needs to recognize that the captain is here and serving an essential purpose for the well-being of the entire ship, the entire enterprise. So too, the non-Jews recognize and need to come to recognize the Jewish people have for thousands of years taken this treasure of divine wisdom and stewarded it and preserved it and made sure that it's not tainted. And I don't mean taking it away. They are preserving it. We are holding on to it. We are reading the same Torah scroll that Moses himself read, copied tens and hundreds and thousands of times by hand by a Torah scholar from generation to generation. So that is, while the Jewish people were being persecuted, they were saving the Torah scrolls. They were saving the teachings, the oral teachings and the written teachings, that they should be preserved for the benefit of all humanity. While the Romans were busy killing people and were busy murdering the Jews and were busy murdering everybody, the Jewish people were concerned and making sure that it should be saved for the benefit of humanity, that this divine wisdom shouldn't be lost on the world. So when a non-Jew recognizes how a Jew is here to be in service to humanity, he's the one who is the one who's making sure that it will always be available for human beings, the spiritual sustenance, the divine wisdom, and making it available to the nations of the world, then that Esau's descendants are going to be, we see the importance and the special mission of the Jewish person. We want to help him accomplish that. What could be greater than to help the Jewish person make sure the Torah teachings are enhanced to become stronger and more vibrantly available in the world? The world should become more aware of them, so that the whole world is living itself according to God Almighty's teachings. That's what the non-Jew is going to want to do. The descendants of Esau are going to realize that they're going to want to do that. So that's the time we're up to now. But we're seeing over here, we're still at the delineation of this massive struggle, of this massive, huge energies. So Esau now harbors hatred towards his brother, and he didn't want to kill him in his father's lifetime, but he definitely wanted to kill Jacob for taking this blessing and for taking the firstborn, and he's going to kill him. And Rebecca knew through divine inspiration that what he was intending, so she summons Jacob, and she says, he's plotting to kill you. So now go and flee to her brother Lavan in Haran, and remain with him till your brother's anger is subsided and abated. And so she goes, and she didn't want to lose both her sons. So Rebecca says, we're now just finishing chapter 27, verse 46. She says she goes to Isaac, and she's now she doesn't want to tell Isaac that Esau is planning to murder Jacob. That would be very distressing. So she says she's disgusted with the fact that all these women that are around that are not living properly should be distressed if Jacob married a local girl. So Isaac calls Jacob and says, don't take a wife from the local women, but rather go to your house of Besuel, your mother's father, take a wife from there, from among the daughters of Lavan, your mother's brother. Besuel is your mother's father, and Lavan is his son, brother of Rivka. Take his daughters from among the daughters. Verse 3, may God Almighty, who is the infinite source of blessing, bless you and make you fruitful and numerous, so that your descendants become a community of peoples. Beautiful to understand that we are meant to be a community. Likhal Amim. May God bestow upon you the same blessing that he gave to my father Abraham for yourself and for your descendants with you, because you will take possession of the land in which you've been sojourning, which God gave to Abraham. So then he sent Jacob on his way, which we're going to learn about next week more, and towards the house of his uncle. And now Esau saw that Jacob got another blessing on account of going and getting a more righteous woman as a wife. So, and that he shouldn't take a wife from among the locals. So Jacob was already married to the locals, so he decides to take another wife, this one from his uncle Ishmael's daughter, and he goes and takes her as a wife. She was herself righteous, but he did not separate himself from the women that were the ones who were spiritually off track. He just added her unfortunately, in kind of this hypocritical way of trying to please his father, at the same time not really willing to part with his ways of transgressions. Rather, he wanted to keep with whatever party life he was having in this world and whatever way he was trying to maximize his physical experiences in this world, and at the same time placate his father by taking a daughter of Yishmael, who was in fact a righteous woman. So that's this week's Torah portion. Any questions? I see there's a question over here. Well, any questions here in person? Questions? Excuse me. Oh, so someone's pointing out, it says, he's pointing out the verse over here that says that Isaac says that the verse 22 in chapter 27, he says, Yaakov, which means to say the voice of Yaakov, the hands are the hands of Esau. So the person who's commenting here in the chat says the hands of Esau and the voice of Jacob also sounds like this partnership of the power of the non-Jews under the guidance of the children of Jacob. Yes, the voice is the voice of the Torah. So it's like this combination. You need the combination. The Koil Yaakov. Yaakov was said before. Ish Tam Yeshiv Eil. Yaakov is sitting in. He's a simple, straightforward person sitting, learning the Torah. In Yeshiv Eil, meaning he's sitting in the tents of Torah. The sweetness of the voice, of the sounds of the learning of Torah. And that's the guidance for the world. The Yadayim, the hands, are the hands of Esau. He's the one that's going to build the world. The great advances in the structures of and the building of civilization that's for the well-being of human beings and glorifies God's names in the world. So that is, let's say, you could see that built by the Romans and the Greeks, and all these great structures were built by these people, descendants of Esau, that and even further into more recent generations, you see the descendants of these of these from the Romans have built all these massive accomplishments in the physical world. That's like the hands of Esau. And the voice that's needed for the world, the voice of guidance for the world that's needed, is the voice of Jacob. That's the voice of the Jewish people. To bring the whole world to serve God Almighty. That the combination of the divine wisdom of the Torah with the incredible, amazing accomplishments that come from the hands of Esau could work together to build an incredible world, a divine world. Any other questions? Okay. It's been beautiful learning with you. And God willing, we will see you all next week. Tonight is Rosh. Let me just mention, tonight is Rosh Chodesh Kislev. It's the first, it's actually the last day of the previous month of Cheshvan, but it's the beginning of the new moon. And this month of Kislev is a special month. We celebrate many great celebrations in this month. We have Hanukkah at the end of the month. We got to get ready for. Talk about next week, some preparations for Hanukkah. We have Yutes Kislev, which is the anniversary of the liberation of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the author of the Shulchan Aruch and the Tanya, who's released from Russian imprisonment under the Tsar. And we have also tonight, actually, is a celebration when the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in 1977, first came out of his office. He spent 40 days in his office after having a heart attack, and on Shmini Atzeres, and then he went home for the first time on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So it's a big time of celebration. And for those that are local, we do not Zoom the Saturday night class, but we have, hopefully you can come in person to look out for the emails in Passaic, New Jersey, or for more information, you could email info@rabbismith.org for information for the Saturday night. We have a beautiful, beautiful learning on the oneness of God Almighty, and we have pizza. So let us know you're coming so we can make sure to be properly outfitted with pizza. And we have space for everybody to come. We could fit all 8 billion people here in the city of Passaic, and I'm sure the pizza store will be happy to prepare pizza for everybody. So please, let's make the pizza store owner happy with this. We'll call him and say, we should call him if it's 7 o'clock after Shabbos is over. We'll say, Mr. Pizza store owner, we need 8 billion slices of pizza by 8 o'clock. He'll get to work, I'm sure. Okay. God bless you all. Thank you all for being here. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Well, thank you for being here.